Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
Uh, so good. Let's speak about your story and why you do what you do.
Absolutely. Uh, sorry, the dogs. Just like, why are they doing that?
Because they're dogs. This is,
Because they're dogs.
yeah,
Because they do what they do.
this
All
is
right. Well,
big, right?
yeah. They're really quiet, so it's strange. All right. So, why do I do what I do? I am a transformational coach. And the reason that I do what I do these days is because I actually lived going through a transformation with mentors, with coaching in a place where I didn't even know what that was. I knew of coaches as strength and conditioning coaches or being in the gym, or prior to that, maybe even a writing coach to help me get my book completed. I didn't know there was a world of transformation mindset and all the things. And it's kind of funny now because I built businesses with my husband right alongside of having my kids. And I think we just get really stuck in, not even stuck, but just focused where we're focused, right? So there wasn't as much need for me to look outside. There wasn't social media at the time where it's so readily available like it is now. But it's really interesting as I look back, even leading teams of people within our business as it grew, we were having managers meetings, and those manager meetings were from a book that it was inspiring me from John C. Maxwell. So there was already leadership being taught that I really didn't know was a whole market, which was really kind of a cool note on the side.
Mhm.
And once we went through a really hard time in life, we ended up losing everything. We lost our business back in '08 when we had all the banking crisis and the housing crisis and all those trickle down events here in the United States. We also had a lot of mom and pop shops that were in landscaping, and that was the focus of our business. We were wholesale landscapers. To make a long story short, when the housing market collapsed, so did the ripple effect of everything else. And so a lot of the small businesses were going out of business, and it was just this continued ripple effect. On top of that, we had a banking system where one of the main banks was bought out overnight by another one. And so anybody with a line of credit to build their business, like we had had for 10 years, it was immediately gone. And so it just changed the landscape of that. So after these big stressful times, it was just this whole convergence, almost like a dark night of the soul, where everything was kind of being thrown at us. My parents had been ill, but they had eventually passed in those 2 years. My aunt, my uncle, my husband's father, it was like this ripple effect of loss. But all the while, I couldn't help but feel like something bigger is coming, something wants to shift. So we didn't fight it. And it got to a point where to rebuild it was too big. So everything that we'd known to do before, we let go and we surrendered to letting it just come to its ending and create that new beginning. And in the middle of that, I realized as a mom, as a business owner, as a wife, I've been really going through the motions. And I sat with myself and I asked, like, what would I do if I was to start completely over? And it scared me a little bit because as I sat with pen and paper, I couldn't think of one thing in a world of a gazillion possibilities. So I thought something's odd with that. And I started getting curious. What are the things that I like to do? What am I doing out of that list? What was something that would be interesting for me to learn? And that's when I became a strength and conditioning coach, because I was spending a lot of time in the gym caring for myself while we were going through this stress. As we
Mhm.
moved through all of that, I realized I'd rather know why people do what they do and why they don't. It fascinated me. And it seems like in that moment of that convergence, along with another question that I asked, who am I? Like all the pieces started coming into place. The mentors arrived, the opportunities arrived, speaking on stage arrived, finding out about coaching arrived. And it was a matter of just following my intuition to like, I want to know what this person's teaching. What they were explaining to me and what I'd heard in conversation was exactly how I felt. I felt like I had this goal. I was here and I wanted to get here. I knew I could get there, but there was this, bridge that was keeping me from getting to the other side. And in my mind, I couldn't figure out what it was keeping me from that. And it was on this moment, watching this speaker on stage when he was explaining this entire series of the weight of the world and how we hold these things in our body, and we start looking through life with all of these lenses, and we're not even seeing clearly, metaphorically, and we have
Mhm.
the weight on the world. He had all these overcoats on as layers of traumas and events that happened in our lives. And as he began to talk about the healing of it, how we could remove each one and a new perspective was there. So he's physically removing these throughout his story, you know? And in the end, like we make meaning of things in our life the best that we can based off what we learned or what our conditioning was prior. And you know, I learned later, as we grow up, we have a filtering system that really doesn't kick in, you know, maybe starts at 8, but they're finding now like 10 and 12 years old. That's a lot of life to live, absorbing everything like a sponge, if you think about it that way.
Mhm.
And so then we've got, you know, whatever our relationship with our parents were, whatever their relationship was, whatever their relationship to whatever was happening with money or happiness or time, all of those things are like a sponge that we absorb, and we create our filter of the world, our first set of glasses, right? So as I was in the study and as I was learning what it was that was exactly the things that were keeping me from getting the other side, it was this freeze mechanism that was in my body. I felt frozen from moving forward, even though my head was like, let's go, let's do the things. And that was the first time I really got to understand the somatics and where we hold all this emotion in our body. It can be micro stresses over time. It can be huge stressful events. It could be things we grew up with. I grew up with a mom who was very ill and in a wheelchair before, by the time I was 12. She had multiple sclerosis. There's a mental and physical aspect and emotional aspect to that, where I just grew up doing the best we could, thinking we were fine. So my default pattern was everything's fine, put a smile on, everything's great, and really believed it. So I didn't really realize where I was holding anger for her and anger for the situation. And once that began to release in my body, I was like, please teach me how to do this. I want to help the world feel better. I didn't know what I didn't know. You know, we all just struggle and suffer with so many stresses and so much of the chaos that happens. And we don't even realize that outside chaos doesn't have to be the same for it to trigger a response that feels familiar of not being safe within our body. And so then we have world events. You know, let's think of the last 5 years. We've had COVID, we've had war, we've had all these things. And how we perceive that and how we're taking in that information reacts a certain way in our body that activates maybe past traumas that were not healed or past responses. So we were talking before we started recording about how the world just seems to be really wanting to heal from trauma right now. Yeah, there was a lot that happened when we said stay inside, don't go to work, stop everything that you've known and sit with yourself.
Mhm.
All
Yeah.
of that rises up. But I really believe now it all rises up to be seen, because we also have this innate ability within ourselves to heal, to transmute emotion, to be able to create by what we focus on most. And so one might argue, well, if we're always focusing on what we don't want, we're getting a series more of what we don't want. We haven't realized we can actually shift that mindset, shift that focus. And when we do, it actually begins to change things in our environment. Well, if you think about somatically, whatever we don't know about is kind of beckoning or beaconing like a lighthouse out in the ocean. This light is kind of like attracting things in. We're always attracting from our deepest wound. And so, whether our mind can make sense of it or not, we're energetically calling in a match for what our frequency is internally. So, as we do this work and we start working on our mindset, personal development, possibly even spiritual development that kind of comes out of those shadows, we raise that frequency. You know, we're talking really a conversation of love versus fear versus anything else. And what are we giving our power to? So I'll pause there for you, but that's really where I got. And as a transformational life and business coach, I really like helping people move from where they are now to their next level. And we don't always know what that next level feels like, especially those of us who've been caregivers, have worked to please people, are perfectionists or recovering perfectionists, and we've been achievers all of our life. We think those achievements are outside of ourselves, and we've given ourselves the value based off how much we do and how much we achieve. And when we really come into this work, we're realizing, oh, there's value in me just being me, and there's a gap. It's the same gap where I met myself in those bigger dreams. So we close that gap, we create safety in the nervous system, and we're able to move forward.
Yes, yes, amazing. You shared such a beautiful experience from your life. And yes, I liked how you said that we attract always what is our most painful wounds. Yeah, because this all information which we went through, those situations which we went through in life, it stays in our body and we have that experience. And if we don't work on that situation and don't give the different meaning to that situation, it will pull our back. Yes, it will pull our down energetically. So
Yeah.
the best way is just to analyze everything what happened that you don't like or you don't didn't like, and when you went through challenges, and give that situations a new meaning, that why those challenges were good for you, right, and what good
Right.
you found in them.
Well,
So
and I
how
love
did
that.
you proceed? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. Really, all of this practical embodiment of this healing led me to my next mentor. When we were learning more, this was more of a study of things I was just super interested in. I really kept meeting people who had intuitive gifts. I kept coming across people um, just had a different belief system than me, but I felt like I'd come home into understanding this connection with our higher source, something, God, source, universe, however we want to call it, right? Everyone's individual with that. But it's a life force energy that's undeniable, that's more than just this body, right? We're a soul within it. I was starting to connect how I kept myself so distracted with life, with chasing 5 pounds. Like we all have a thing, right? Like me, it was like, oh, it's the perfect body, all the things. And it kept me very busy and distracted from really getting to know who I was. So what really unfolded through all of this was such a blessing as I got to really know who I was and take a look where I was so good at being everything for everyone else. I could be whatever you wanted me to be. I don't know if anybody's ever had that, right? And then wondering why everything wasn't always aligning in my life with friendships or different things. You know, why did people always leave? And I had made meaning to these. What they're known now is like fears, this fear of abandonment that I learned, these deep fears that we don't want to talk about. But when we can look at them, we begin to master what we can understand about emotional resilience. We actually get to become the observer versus having everything done to us. We begin to look at it from a different perspective, like what's happening for us in this, what's repeating, what's the common denominator in these patterns that are repeating. It doesn't have to be the same person, it can be like feelings. We all have that. Oh my god, this friendship ended up being just like this other friendship, but different, weird. And then it's that moment where you're like, wonder what that is all about. Huh, maybe it's me. Oh no, it's not. And then we move on. But what if it was? Not to be guilty or judgment, but what if we get curious about that? What is it within us that has an expectation or some programming that's having bigger expectations for someone else to fill a void than what we're willing to fill within ourselves? And that was the moment where I'm like, I got so excited about observing my life and bringing new awareness to things. And I want to preface that with we can also get stuck in a loop of being aware and then accepting and then taking responsibility for making a change or a different choice or different perspective. But oftentimes we can get stuck in that loop. And then now we know more than we knew before, but we're still driving ourselves crazy because we're taking all the responsibility. And there's such an harmony. There's a not a balance, but an ebb and flow with that, right? Where we're really just observing, we're checking in with self, we're discerning, we're getting to know ourselves more. We're not just the things that we do, or we're not just what everyone else said we should, need, or have to be. Well, there's a deepening, there's a oneness with it. There's a bigger purpose that we all feel the pull to. We either listen to the call and follow it, or we deny it, shove it down under a rug. But when we have all these emotional events happen in our body, I think we think it just goes away because we move on, but they compound. So it's like a compound interest. And eventually that volcano wants to blow. We only move emotion by actually letting ourselves express emotion, by writing it, or by physically moving it. And if we're not aware of that, we're not focusing on. moving that through. We're not focusing on being okay, being a feeling being. And in a world that tells you to suck it up, get up, and keep going, of course, we're programmed to not pay attention, to not really know what our inner power is of being able to choose again. So when I teach my clients, I teach them from a perspective of now let's activate what we want. What does that feel like? How can we bring momentum in holding that feeling state and focusing the mind towards that so it can start to move into a possibility thinking instead of a scarcity and lack? And we're always going to be toggling between those. But again, we're at choice point. We get to choose what we focus on, and it's going to create a new intentional focus. And so some people really enjoy that, and some people don't. What's familiar is at least familiar. And so then we have that demarcation between those who really expand in that personal development and those who don't really want to partake. Does that make sense?
Yes, really. I think that people find fulfillment only when they connect to themselves.
Yeah. And that
Uh,
we and in turn we're like shopping for it on aisle 3 thinking it's something we can go buy. We don't recognize that it comes from within. Same thing with happiness, peace, calm, ease. We can have all of these things in the polarity of life even when there's chaos. And I think that was the greatest gift that I learned through really navigating a lot of chaos at one time. There's still these moments where the tree leaves are beautiful, the butterflies still walk by, the kids are playing in the street, laughter is still happening. So no matter what was happening in our world, how stressful and how much on a downward spiral it felt, there was always this basics of life that was so beautiful, and it kept me grounded. I think for the first time really recognizing what the present moment was, because in that moment I didn't have to worry about the past or the future, and there was peace because I wasn't going to let the stress of that take over. I wasn't going to let it fuel into our young kids. Our stress didn't have to be their stress, and so it really brought me into the present moment of playing with them, being with them from the time we came home from work to the time they went to bed. And it changed everything for me and what was possible with that.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for sharing. It was really so much value in what you just told about. Yes, I think that it is time now to wake up and to really raise consciousness, because many people, just as you said, live with so many different coats on them, different glasses, right? Like, which formed their perception of the world. And uh, the life can be different for different people. The same situations can be different for different people. It is just the way how we look at things, because when we change the way how we look at things, the things change, right?
Right.
And this is how so many people can be in the same situation and they can have totally different experience. So it is not about the life or situation, it's all about us, and how we see the world through the prism of our consciousness, because
That's
this is our consciousnesses, and those programs which were built even not by us till we wake up and start building them themselves ourselves. They were built by people who even didn't know anything about us and about our potential. But that is why it is so important to wake up and understand that I am the main actor in my movie, which is my life, and then start learning about yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
connect to yourself and really understand that you can create anything you want, and you can create that state where you are comfortable and where you want to live, and which will brings you joy and life love.
Yeah.
Yeah. uh, Thank you very much. So we will finish this here, and I'm looking forward to meet you again.